Thank you, Alice. So the recording is now in progress. Welcome, everybody. Thank you again for joining this ICA UK online focused conversation session. Today on the topic of feminist facilitation. So my name is Martin Gilbraith. I'm going to share my screen for just a few moments to talk you through the session today and what we'll be doing together. So here we go. So I hope you can see that. Welcome to our online focused conversation on feminist facilitation. Just a very brief word about your facilitators for today. I'm an associate trainer of ICA UK and also a certified professional facilitator of IM. I'm delighted to be working today with Alice and Julia, and I invite each of them to say a few words about themselves. Julia, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, thanks Martin, and good afternoon everybody. It's lovely to see so many of you here. So my name is Julia Makin. I'm a facilitator, and my facilitation work is primarily concerned with strengthening social and environmental resilience. I'm also an ICA associate, and I'm training to be a trainer on the group facilitation methods course. So I've seen a few of you before. Nice to see you again. And then I also, in my paid work capacity, manage employee and community volunteering for the City of London Corporation. So that's me.
Hi everybody. Sorry, can you hear me now? Hi, I'm Alice. I work for ICA UK and on the staff team. You might have heard from me before. I do all the marketing and arranging of the courses and chatting to participants, but I'm here today as well as that capacity to be the tech host and the producer. So if anything goes wrong with the tech, it's either it might be my fault, or I will try and make everything go smoothly. So if you've got any questions or anything, just let me know in the private chat and I'll help you. But back over to Martin, I think.
Thank you. And I just need to check that you can still see and hear me. Yeah?
Yeah.
Because since we started in the last 2 minutes, I've just had 2 notices from Zoom that my Zoom has crashed, and I wasn't sure if I was still in the room or not. That's not your fault, Alice. That's probably my fault.
That's not my fault.
That may be the fault of my connection. So I hope I stay with you. I'm going to take just a couple more minutes to walk you through what we have planned for the session. And then I'll be handing over to Julia in a few minutes. Just to say that our aims today for this session are to invite and enable you all to connect with each other, to share and learn from each other from your interest in this topic of feminist facilitation, to give you all an experience of the ICA top focus conversation method, which some of you may be familiar with, some of you may not be, and also to share with you some sources of further support and information, both about feminist facilitation and about ICA and the focus conversation method. So that's what we're here for. Just to say that, like most facilitation, we are here to ask questions of you rather than to tell you what we know or what we think about the topic. However, unlike some facilitation, we're not neutral to this topic. We are actually here today to promote both facilitation and feminism and feminist facilitation and ICA's top focus conversation method in particular. We're also aiming today to be sensitive to power and privilege and how that plays out during the session, and the possibility of trauma, of pain and injustice, and to invite you all to care for yourselves and to care for each other during this session. So please do feel free to do what you need to do in order to look after yourselves and look after each other. I also want to make clear, if there are any other men in the room, that feminism is not just for women, and it's our responsibility as much as everybody else's. So that's part of the reason why I'm here today and playing this role and opening the session for us. Before we go on, a couple of words about what we mean by feminist facilitation in the context of this session, because both of these words, feminism and facilitation, are quite broad topics, and the terms are quite widely used. So we're referring to the terms as used in the blog post that I drafted a few months ago. We shared a link in advance. Some of you may have read it. I do invite you to look at it afterwards if you haven't already looked at it before the session. In that session, sorry, in that blog post, I drew on a model of feminist leadership for social transformation from CREA, which talks about feminist leadership in terms of 4 quadrants of the leadership diamond. So that's power, politics and purpose, principles and values, and practices. So that's what we're taking as our definition for our purpose today of feminist leadership, feminism as it applies to facilitation, a leadership role. And in terms of facilitation, we're taking the definition of IAF in terms of its core facilitator competencies and its code of ethics. IAF, if you're not familiar, is the International Association of Facilitators. So if you're not familiar with those, don't worry about it. We'll share links in the chat. We'll invite you to make yourself more familiar with those as we go through. But if there are any questions about what we mean by feminism or facilitation, do please go ahead and raise them in the chat as and when the time comes. Are there any questions from anybody at this stage, or anything I've missed, anything I should add, Julia or Alice? No? In that case, let's go on and hear a little bit about all of you. We're a large group today, so we're not going to have time to invite all of you to introduce yourselves to all of you, but you will be in breakouts a little bit later and have an opportunity to speak in smaller groups. In order to get a sense of who's in the room right now, let me share my screen again just for a moment. I hope you see the Venn diagram there. And we wonder, do you describe yourself as a facilitator? Do you describe yourself as a feminist? Perhaps describe yourself as neither or both. Please use the annotate tool to put a mark of some sort on the Venn diagram. And I'm going to ask.
So that Christina's highlighting that you already have things.
Oh, I think Martin's just frozen there. But if you go to, we'll just wait for him to.
I do apologize. I seem to be crashing out again and again. Let me try that again. Are you able to see the Venn diagram?
Yes, we are indeed, yeah.
Very good. Alice, please go ahead and explain how to annotate that.
Yeah, sure. So if you go to the top of your screen, you should see a green bar, and then next to it, you should see something that says view options and an arrow, a little arrow downwards. If you click on that little downwards arrow, you'll get a box, and one of those options says annotate. And if you click on that, you'll get a toolbar, and you should be able to either write your name or get a stamp, a love heart, a star, a question mark, and then just move over to the whiteboard and click on it where you think you might fall in that Venn diagram.
And isn't that interesting? Most of us seem to describe ourselves as both feminist and facilitator, which maybe explains why you're all here, but it also reflects on our definition as what we mean. I mean, maybe to be a feminist is to be a facilitator. Does anybody have any comments or reflections on where they put themselves on this chart, or what they see in terms of where others have put themselves? We'd love to hear 1 or 2 voices at this stage. If anybody would like to raise your hand, please do go ahead.
I've never consciously been a feminist facilitator, but now you've made me think about it. I quite like the idea of I am a facilitator and I am a feminist, but I've never thought about putting the two together. So I quite like that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Anyone else?
Can I go?
Please.
So I've been always thinking of myself as a feminist facilitator, because I'm joining a lot of youthful movements. So this definition has been to the foreground earlier in my life.
Perfect. Thank you. Anyone else? Would love to hear one or two more voices if anybody else would like to speak.
This is Kathleen calling from the US.
Welcome.
And hi, yes, I appreciate this question. And also just wanted to bring in the concept of the womanist theory that Alice Walker and others have advanced, which is recognizing that often the feminist movement has been a very white focused movement, and that the womanist movement also pays particular attention to the experiences of Black females, women, but also Black men.
Thank you. Anyone else? One last reflection before we move on?
I think, hi everyone, I think I am a feminist. I do facilitation, and it's just to say, it's something I try to be very intentional about. How do I apply my feminist principles to the way that I facilitate? But it's very difficult. It's a very thorny issue, as I'm sure Martin will get into later with you. It is a very political practice. And I don't think as feminists we can shy away from that. So it's all about kind of transforming power relations in the space, and that's really tricky. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. Which perhaps is the ideal segue to move on to go into a little bit more depth about our own experience and interest in feminist facilitation. So let me hand over to Julia, who's going to lead us in the rest of this conversation.
Thanks very much, Martin. Just very briefly before we do, I've just picked up a message in the chat from Irene about closed captions. Alice, I'm not sure if you saw that, if it's possible to enable closed captions for Irene and anybody else that benefits from using those, that would be great. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Thanks very much. Okay, so as Martin says, we're now moving into the part of the session where we will be bringing our own experiences, both around feminism and facilitation. And in just a moment, Alice is going to post 2 questions that will help us guide this conversation. We'll be speaking to each other in breakout rooms, quite small breakout rooms of around about 3 or 4 participants in each. So hopefully it will enable us all to have a chance to share our own experiences. And whilst you're in those breakouts, obviously what we recognise is that some of the discussion may well raise difficult experiences for you. So let's look after each other and treat those experiences sensitively, and consider what you would like to share, and please only share what you're comfortable with. So the questions that we would like you to explore whilst you're in the breakout rooms are about your experience, and it's when you felt a need or an opportunity for a more feminist approach to facilitation. So that's a need or an opportunity for a more feminist approach to facilitation. We'd also like you to think about the question, when have you felt the impact of a more feminist approach to facilitation? So that's about when you've seen feminist approaches in facilitation, it's had an impact on you. So very soon we're going to open up those breakout rooms. We'd like you to bring your experience, share your stories. We'll have about 6 minutes in these small groups. And once we come back into the room, we'll discuss some of the themes and some of the content that's emerged while you've been talking together. So please, I think we're ready to go. Alice, if you're open, happy for us to open the room?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go for it. Thank you.
Sending you to the rooms in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, everybody. I can see faces returning to the main room. Great to see you all. And I hope you've had a really interesting and thought-provoking time in your breakout rooms. And it would be wonderful now to hear a little bit, perhaps, of a flavour of your breakout conversation. and what common themes perhaps that we've heard in our rooms, or anything that was new or surprising to you that others shared. So if you're feeling comfortable and willing to share, you can do so either by using the chat function, if that comes most naturally to you, or if you'd be so kind as to raise your hand, and we'll try and keep an eye on the order that people raise their hands so that we can come to you in turn. But just to recap those questions then, a little bit of a flavour of your conversation, any common themes that have emerged, and anything that was new or surprising to you from your rooms.
Hi, Julia.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi. Sorry, there's a bit of background sound here. So can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, are you sure?
Thank you.
I'm really happy for us to share as a group. The people I was with, please let me know if I've missed anything. We spanned Switzerland, Kenya, Manchester and London in the UK. We had a lovely conversation. It was quite brief, but we instantly shared our perspectives, which we felt were all valid, but sort of came up with a sort of composite picture, which I think was around care, first and foremost. So facilitation involving care, understanding caregiving roles, the complexity of lives, that we are often bringing an understanding that we're facilitating people, individuals and a collective in the middle of the complexity of their lives. And caring, obviously being sometimes often being a part of that, being cognizant of who's not in the room and who's missing. So the empty chair, and always mindful of intersectional feminism. So the multiplicity of identities and roles that we're bring to play. Wanting to bring a holistic approach and a belief in holism. So trying to understand opportunities for points of connection between those different intersectional kind of identities, and celebrating opportunities for the whole being greater than some of the individual parts. And then a piece around love and compassion, emotion and vulnerability, and being deeply human. And then a piece on storytelling as a facilitation practice to demonstrate progress. And finally, a recognition and celebration, and trying to encourage the recognition of new forms of power, especially quiet power in the room. Is that okay,
Rachel,
guys?
thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for succinctly pulling together the threads of the conversation you had in the group. And if anyone in that group wants to come forward and add to that, please do. Or if not, then it would be great to hear from some other breakouts. Some themes coming through in the chat as well. Lots of nitty-gritty on this topic with Lorenza. The definition of feminism was one topic of discussion. Very interesting. And someone has raised the term hippo, and hearing that for the first time. Highest paid person in the room. That's a new one on me as well. Rachel, you've just been given kudos from Suzanne in terms of your sum up, which was great and very wide ranging. And really touched on that topic, I think, well, multiple topics of care, the complexities of people's lives, the people that aren't in the room, how we look at that power dynamic in the room as well. So lots and lots of material and themes there for us to mull over. Thank you. I'm just seeing some more come through in the chat now, which I'm very happy to read out. Or again, if people feel that they are comfortable to open their mics, it's even better.
Can I dive in just for 2 seconds?
Sure. Hi,
I am not going to even try to follow on from Rachel's superb summary, but I just wanted to mention one thing that came up in our group. Virginia mentioned the concept of language justice, and it's something that I'm very mindful of because I speak very, very quickly and I try very hard to change it. But I just thought it was an interesting concept in terms of feminist facilitation, not just about self-care and looking after everybody in the room, but being really, really mindful about how, as a native English speaker with a group of many people who are from different language backgrounds, or if you have a particular dialect of English and you're familiar using that dialect and expecting everyone to keep up. I just thought this was a really good thing to raise and be mindful of. And one of the things that Virginia mentioned, which I thought was wonderful and very useful for me was just to say, making sure that when you've got a mixed group of people, giving people a little bit more time, because, you know, I can say this from speaking German as a second language, I definitely need an extra minute just to try and process before I can even answer. And so, yes, I just wanted to throw that out there because we're such a mixed group. So.
Thanks, Suzanne. Absolutely, really important point, and it's, you know, that's wider than feminism. It's also about power dynamics and anti-oppression as well. So that's a great point to note. Thank you for bringing it through. So just returning to a couple of the points on the chat, Inez says that John and me have shared our experiences about when we felt the need to include more women so that we can cut with the single gendered views. Diana shared her experience with Feminist Facilitation in Creators of Peace, which is a women-oriented organisation. And some other themes that came through, we were talking more about practical steps on how to get more women into facilitation in different places and levels. So some fantastic and very, very interesting themes coming through there. Discussion about the elements of fairness and equality, i.e. that fairness and equality is different, and also that some people need longer to make their point, which is speaking to your point there, Suzanne. Super. Well, thank you very much indeed for those reflections as we begin to delve deeper into this very deep and wide conversation. So now we've had the opportunity to reflect and draw on our own experiences, let's consider the models that were shared by Martin of feminist leadership and facilitation earlier in the session. And I think we've started to discuss and touch on some of these already. So great to go into that in more detail now. So we're going to explore 3 questions, and this takes us on to the next level of the focus conversation, where we start to be more interpretive and thinking about feminist facilitation as a topic. So the 3 questions, and again, Alice, if you wouldn't mind posting these, they are: what does feminism bring to facilitation? What does feminist facilitation look like? And what can we all do to ensure that our own practice is more effectively and explicitly feminist, anti-racist, and anti-oppressive? So this time we're actually going to remain in the room, rather in the big room, rather than going into breakout groups. And I invite you all to consider your thoughts around all or any of these questions. If there's one of those 3 questions that speaks to you more than others, please do spend the time on that one. And as soon as you're ready, and if you feel comfortable, once again, if people don't mind putting their answers into the chat or raising hands or even opening your mic, if there's not a cue to speak, feel free just to share your thoughts openly.
It's a lot to think about.
I was going to say, it's absolutely fine to take some time to digest as well. We're comfortable with quiet moments. Hi, Susanna, do come in.
Yes, thank you. I was, I think Catherine wrote a very good comment in the in what we discussed, and I was just sharing an example of when I was facilitating a session in Serbia with a group of Roma women, and I think the reaction, and that got us thinking later on, is that me and my colleague were actually belonging to the majority population in Serbia. And then we were facilitating, of course, we were doing the process facilitation, but I think our experience is that of the majority population in Serbia, and their experience is of the minority population in Serbia. And I think what we should have done is actually invite one of them to co-facilitate the session with us, so that we are more aware of the needs, the different needs, and maybe the way we structure the dialogue, and what questions to raise. So even though we did have that discussion with them, I think we should have invited that. So actually creating a room for, what we could do is create the room for co-facilitating with the people that we are, that have a different experience maybe that we ourselves have.
Thank you, Susanna, for sharing that learning point as well that you experienced through practice. That's great to hear about. John, I think your hand was up next, and then we'll move to Siu.
Yeah, thanks. I was prompted by question 3, and I think that's it. You know, that it's about ensuring that throughout our practice, it is explicitly feminist and anti-oppressive in every sense. Now, I've worked a lot on a model of anti-oppression over the years, and we've got to the point where in training facilitators, we've kind of developed our own, what do you call it, competencies, which is an extension of the IAF competencies, but much more explicit around anti-oppression. But even that's not enough, because that's like a kind of a checklist approach. So I think it's kind of, it's being conscious constantly and working consistently with those principles in terms of how you work as a team, whoever you're working with, and how you work with your participants and so on. So it's many things. I think that's all I'm trying to say, you know. But I wouldn't want to neatly put it in a box, although we tried to do that at some point.
Thanks, John. Yes, and probably the putting some things down as principles and codes is a way of translating the intention into action. So that's great to hear about. So yes, see you please next, and then we'll go to Erica. Thank you.
Yes, as a facilitator, I would like to share a bit of when feminism is more used or emphasized, especially in relation to the power, like the power of facilitator. We design and we kind of like sometimes become a gatekeeper. And I find that when we are more in the flow of the situation, that I find that I'm more open, sharing the power, and more aware where and when I'm more effective, rather than holding on to the power of the facilitator. By sharing it and leveraging the experience of the participant, I find that the experience is deeper and more resonant. I'm complete.
Thank you very much for sharing that. So yes, in your role as facilitator, you're opening space and holding space for other people to talk about their experiences, which hopefully brings that into the conversation. Thank you for that. Erica.
Thank you. My response goes more to the mix of the answer of the question, the first and the second. What does feminism bring to facilitation, and what a feminist facilitation looks like? It's to be more like adequate the space, the language, and the behavior that you're having in the room, but also be aware about the context, the relation, and about the people that you're working with. Also be aware about the time, especially when you're working with women, because the time is really valuable for them. And respect and try to be always horizontal, not trying to impose certain hierarchy, certain power over the group that you're working with. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica. So yes, some top tips there for thinking about the time and the structure of courses and how to make them more accessible to women. Thank you for that. And then final verbal comment from Rachel. I'm mindful there's also some really great points in the chat, which I'm hoping that people are having the opportunity to read whilst we're speaking also. Please do go ahead, Rachel.
Just to thank, thankful for the comment around codification. I'm constantly trying to learn about where you keep openness for flow and where you need to document and codify. And I think if we're codifying these practices, by doing so, we've got the opportunity to make them more inclusive and accessible for more people to practice, and to do that as quickly as possible rather than it just be a practice that sits in our own story. So I think that's really important. Secondly, I said in my smaller group earlier, I think the word facilitation is a bit like communication. It's a word that's so overused and rarely done well. And what I'm enjoying about this approach is a deeper understanding of facilitation through the lens of feminism. I'm holding on to the idea of when you're purely facilitating, historically, it's been in service of the group. So therefore, how much of yourself do you hold back? And through a feminist approach, what I'm learning is the value and the power of bringing your whole self as a facilitator into the room and share your story, especially if you're a woman that's been on a journey, and how that storytelling can be encouraging at the very least. And then my conclusion, my takeaway is the opportunity we've got to reappropriate through all the best political movements. To language is everything, language sets culture, how we can reappropriate the word of facilitation through feminist facilitation. And I'm learning so much today, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel. It's almost as though you're a plant in the audience, because with those very articulately put comments, you've moved us very nicely into the final part of our conversation today. But thank you all for bringing your thoughts and reflections and interpretations to the conversation so far. And at this point, what we like to do is move into a phase of thinking about the next steps. So drawing on everything that we've heard, including the models of feminism and facilitation that Martin opened the session with, let's just spend a couple of minutes really quietly and individually thinking and capturing for yourself what is one thing that you're going to do to continue your learning or develop your practice as a result of what you've heard in the session today. And at the same time, if you can think of any links or resources that might be useful to the rest of the group, as a secondary ask, please also feel free to share those in the chat as well if you think they're useful to others. But yes, just spend a moment now thinking about what is that one thing that you think you will do to continue your learning or develop your practice. And once you capture this for yourself, then I invite you to share it with each other if you're comfortable, and if it helps you to declare your intention. Thank you, John. I've just seen your comment there in the chat about reading, sharing, learning more from others, starting with Martin's article. It's a great place to start.
I think I would like to share something.
Please. Hi, Sunshine.
Hi. Thank you for today. It's been, even though short, like I haven't been part of any of the other facilitation courses or talks, but and literally just found this today in a little bit of desperation, because I have been having some facilitation urgencies. I'm not myself a facilitator, I'm a curator of contemporary art, but a lot of my work is facilitation of ideas and trying to bring projects together. So in response to the first of the sort of concluding questions, what is one thing you will do to continue your learning? I feel like it's to do with limits and conflict. I also put something in earlier, which I don't know whether you read, something about conflict that I've found quite difficult as part of trying to keep a spirit of generosity and care in a group situation. So yeah, I think right now for me, the challenge is to understand my limits sooner than the point where I hit them, and where I feel in a group situation, I can no longer respond and process well enough, and I sort of react more than I respond. And I feel that there's a bit of a difference between the two that I'm still learning. So yeah, that is the one thing, something to do with conflict, something to do with limits I need to understand better.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Sunshine. Brilliant. I can see there's lots coming up in the chat as well, and I hope that people are having a chance to read what's coming out in writing. Anyone else wishing to open their mic to share their one next step, or one thing that they will do?
I'm happy to share one. It relates to what Sunshine said about conflict, and I don't know if we're talking on the same lines or maybe parallel, Sunshine, but just to say, I think feminist spaces or spaces that are facilitated in a feminist way will not always be comfortable. They may feel very uncomfortable. Perhaps as a facilitator, you might be required to interrupt bias, interrupt an harmful pattern where you see it occurring, or also I feel like in my facilitation, I haven't always been welcoming of conflict, or what in anti-oppression terms is called principled disagreement. So I think my commitment to myself is to kind of facilitate in a way that allows, whether you want to call it conflict, whether you want to call it disagreement, where I'm actually designing to allow that to surface and occur, because really we're not going to transform power dynamics without embedding that into the way that we're facilitating and being really intentional about it. And I feel like it's not something I'm particularly very good at. So if anyone is good at that and has resources, please share them. That would be great. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Layla. That feels like a really great moment to pause this part of the conversation and hand back to Martin to reflect on what we've just been walking through there.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Julia, and thank you, everyone. I'm so excited that we've been able to bring together such an experienced and thoughtful and interesting group today. I have to say, one thing I'm going to do to continue my learning and develop my practice is take some time to read through everything you've shared in the chat and watch the recording again, because I really haven't had time to take it all in right now. In case you didn't realize, we will be sharing the recording afterwards publicly on the website, and we'll be sharing the chat with those who registered. So you all will receive the chat. I've got a few more slides to share. We'll be sharing the slides afterwards as well. What we're going to do in these last 10 minutes or so of the session is to look at the method that Julia used to lead you in that conversation. We're going to step aside now from the topic of feminist facilitation and look at the conversation method. I see Zoom is telling me that it's quitting unexpectedly again, so I may crash out.
I might just give Martin 10 seconds or so just to see whether his Zoom comes back in again, which it did before. But if not, then we can continue with the slide as it is up on the page.
Yeah.
And for any of you, sorry, was that you, Alice? Did you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if not, I can share the slideshow and perhaps you could talk through it.
Yeah, exactly. So for anybody that has attended the ICA's group facilitation methods course before, this may well look familiar. It's slightly, I just want to apologise for the jargon. We quite often refer to it just as an ORID framework without explaining necessarily what those mean. So let me take you through each of those layers and levels that you can see on the slide there. So the O or the O of ORID stands for objective level questioning. Oh, I've lost the slide now. I can't see it anymore myself.
Julia, I am back if you'd like me to take over. I
Yeah,
do apologise for this. I don't know what's going on with my Zoom today.
We got to objective level, but not much further.
Okay, thank you. I hope you can see my shared slides again. Just to say that the focused conversation method, this is the structure that Julia used to lead the conversation today about feminist facilitation. It's a method of ICA's technology of participation, the methodology that ICA has developed in its work in community development and in all sorts of organizations and groups around the world for 50 or so years. And it's built on, the focused conversation method is built on a model of how human beings think clearly when they think clearly. And the model is called ORID, named after the 4 levels of experience. And the model suggests that as human beings, we experience life through our senses, through the senses of taste, touch, smell, sight, and sound. First of all, in reaction to our sensory perception, we have some kind of a reflective level response, maybe an emotional response or an associational response. So we may feel surprised, shocked, interested, delighted, or whatever. We may be reminded of something, for example. Only after that sensory experience and that reflective reaction does our head begin to make some kind of sense of our experience. That's what we call the interpretive level of sense ideas and so forth, interpretations. And only after all three of those levels do we actually come to any conclusion, resolution, or action. So this model suggests that all of us go through these four levels of experience all the time, very often unconsciously. And the purpose of using the model in the focused conversation method and in facilitation is to make the process more, to slow the process down and make it more transparent to the individual, but also to the group, and to bring a whole group together through all four levels in turn, so that everybody can be more aware of their own and each other's process. The way it works in terms of the focused conversation method is that we firstly determine the aims of the conversation, which in this case were to give you an experience of the method and incite and enthuse you into exploring feminist facilitation more closely, but also to give you an opportunity to share and learn from each other on your own experience of feminist facilitation. And then based on those aims, to design a series of questions that lead you as a group through the four levels. So in this case, you may remember, we began by asking you about yourselves. Are you a feminist? Are you a facilitator, or both? How do you refer to yourself? We asked you in breakout groups and then briefly in plenary discussion to share something of your experience, and in particular, your experience of felt need of feminist facilitation and any hopes or concerns you have for feminist facilitation. And then after a bit of conversation about that, we got into the interpretation, the meaning. We asked you, what does feminism bring to facilitation? What does it look like? What can we all do to be more feminist in our facilitation? And then finally, we asked you about your next steps, one thing that you'll do, and any links and resources to share. So that's just a very fast whistle-stop tour through the ORID focused conversation method, but I hope it gives you a little glimpse under the bonnet, if you like, of what went on in designing and preparing and leading that conversation. I wonder if there are any questions about that or any reflections on that before we go any further. I see Alice also has shared one or two links in the chat, so that's great. Any reflections on this conversation? If we take a step back from the topic and think of the process and your experience on it, any reflections on that? Or questions on the method? Please go ahead. Can you see the slide again? Yes, certainly. You mean the one with the questions? Or the one with the ORID model?
Thank you. Yeah.
No questions or reflections? In that case, while we're on the slide, we have one more, well, a couple more slides to share, actually. First one, this is to say, I mentioned ICA's technology of participation. The focused conversation method is one of 5 or more methods of ICA's technology of participation, which is a powerful but very versatile suite, if you like, of tools and methods that you can use to design and facilitate virtually anything. And ORID is the foundation of all of it. But the other key methods you'll see listed there: consensus workshop, action planning, strategic planning, and so forth. And you'll see on the left of that slide the values of the top approach, which underpin all of this. There's a few resources about the method and the methodology. Firstly, The Art of Focused Conversation is a book all about the focused conversation method, and very practical, very useful if you're interested in exploring that further and applying that. And then ICA's Group Facilitation Methods training course is the course where you can learn in depth about the focused conversation method and also the consensus workshop method. I wonder, Alice, would you like to say anything more about that and further resources from ICA UK?
Yeah, absolutely. I've just popped in the chat just some further links with our course calendar and a link to our Group Facilitation Methods course overview, which is the course that teaches the focused conversation method, which you've just seen there, and you get the chance to practice that, have a demo walkthrough, experience it, and then stand up and facilitate the group that you're with. So you leave knowing how to facilitate the focused conversation, and also the consensus workshop method as well. And you get to learn the ICA approach to facilitation and some extra tips and tricks as well. I've also left my contact details in there if anybody would like to speak to me or my colleague Claire. And another interesting thing that we've got coming up is, which is new for this year, is if anybody's been on the Group Facilitation Methods course already in person, then we're now going to offer a Taking Top Methods online course, which shows you might have wondered how to take the consensus workshop, especially from a wall onto a computer, and how to do that successfully. So if you look on our course calendar, you will also find a course called Taking Top Methods Online, and that shows you how to take the consensus workshop and the focus conversation workshop as well online. So yeah, I guess the last thing today would be thank you. It's been a real pleasure. It's the first one we've done of these since 2020, and it's great to see so many people and so many faces from around the world, and I really thank you for all your contributions. It's given me a lot to think about, so there we go. And I'm just going to pop a evaluation link in the chat, because as it's our first one, we'd love to hear what you thought about it and whether there's anything that we can do more to support you all and to help you on your journeys. So yeah, if you could fill that in, that would be most appreciated.
May I also add that I do encourage you all to connect and stay connected with each other if you wish. Having discovered this shared interest, feel free to put your email address or LinkedIn profile or any other contact detail you would like to share with the rest of the group. If you'd like to paste that into the chat now before you go. As I said, we'll be sharing the content of the chat with all of those who registered for this session, but not publicly on any website. So if you'd like to enable others to connect with you, share your contact details in the chat just now. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you, Julia, thank you, Alice, thank you everybody so much for coming. We've got a couple more minutes. I think we'll probably close the session and switch off the recording at this point, but if anybody else would like to stay on and chat informally for a few minutes, or if you have any other questions or reflections to share, we'd very much love to hear them.